welcome to our webinar today. I know a few of you are still getting connected to audio and getting your settings set up and everything. So we're just going to start with a few intros and housekeeping items, and then we'll get into our content today. But we're so glad you've joined us. I'm Hannah Curtis with the North Metro Small Business Development Center. For those of you who aren't familiar with the SBDC, we offer free one-on-one consulting with our business experts. And we do some educational programming like this webinar and some online courses as well. So you can always find out more about the services we offer at our website, which is northmetrosbdc.com. I'll drop that link in the chat here later as well. But today we're going to be talking about your proof of concept. You have an idea for a business, but what do you need to do to actually get it to market? So with us today, we have Jon Jaggers, who's been with the SBDC for many years, one of our lead consultants. So we're very lucky to have him with us today. And before we get into that content, I do want to mention we are recording this session and we will upload it to our video library later this afternoon, which is also accessible through our website. So you can always find it there, and I will send out a follow-up email with the slides from today and the recording and a few other resources. So you'll have all of that you can access down the road if need be. And also feel free to drop any questions into the chat. We want this to be as interactive as possible. If they are very specific questions, we'll probably recommend that you schedule a consultation to dive into that deeper. But any kind of general questions we can definitely answer today during the session. So feel free to put those in the chat. I think that's it for housekeeping. So Jon, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Hannah. Just real quick, I want to cover my background. Was fortunate enough to have 30 plus years of manufacturing management experience. So very focused in on manufacturing, but when I talk about products today, I'm going to be talking about both from a standpoint of a product and or a service. So if you're contemplating a service or you're involved in a service, don't let it bother you. So 30 years of manufacturing management, and for the last 8 years, I've been fortunate enough to be a consultant for SBDC. Have had probably 100 plus clients during that 8 years, many of which are startups. And again, I think what Hannah was saying, great product, turning it into a functioning business. So a lot we're going to talk about is an overview. Don't feel like you got to take notes because I'm going to talk pretty quick. We're going to cover a bunch of different concepts, and so we'll have probably 15 minutes at the end for questions, or you can feed a question to Hannah as we go, and then we'll try to cover all of them at the end. So proof of concept or product development, you can call it either one. And like I say, I do have 8 years of experience with a number of different clients. So let's jump right into it, Hannah. So Hannah, can you, it doesn't show up, not all of it's showing up. Can you minimize the participants? At least on my screen, I don't see it all. So
you're not seeing the PowerPoint?
I see it, but it's cut off by, can you move the picture participants?
I think you might have to do that on your side. There's some buttons in the top left of your corner.
Okay. I got it.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I don't want to read all this, but I'm gonna touch on it because this is what's driving the whole discussion. The main thrust behind proof of concept is to methodically investigate your idea that it is in fact a viable model for a product. And this does require, as you're going to see, we're going to cover a lot of different aspects of this. It does require an investment of your time, but that will improve the odds of your success. And I can tell you, in the 100 clients that I've dealt with, those that take the time to go through what we're going to talk about today are successful, and some of them are not. But with your product idea in mind, you may be inclined to just jump forward to production or service, but that can be a misstep, and you need to validate your idea first. So the product validation is ensuring that we create a product or service that people will pay for and won't waste time, money, and effort on your part that the idea won't sell. And I'll give you one specific example on that. I don't want to get into too much detail, but the person that was putting this together, I'd had a consulting call with him, and then I went out. He said, "Come out to my shop. I'll show you what I'm doing." It was building cat condos. I'm gonna let that sink in a minute. Cat condos. They were basically 4x4 little houses where the cats were supposed to roam and have a good time. So, okay, well, fine. So I went out to his shop. He had already had 100 of these built, and he had all kinds of materials and supplies laid out that going to continue to build it. And I said, well, okay, this is good. How many have you sold so far? Well, I sold one to my mother's friend. I said, well, you got a considerable investment here. Have you done any research on people that would, or cats and their owners that would like a cat condo? No, I haven't done any of that. So I tried to get them on more involved in the analysis and marketing in particular, because he had already had products, and used some of our SBDC other consultants. But unfortunately, with all that investment, he had to file bankruptcy. So that's a bad example of, or a good example of a bad example. So I'm sorry to say, but that's a rare occasion, but it does happen. So that's why we're going through all of this. Okay, go ahead, Anna. So we're going to cover a lot of different aspects, the actual inception of the product, how to put together a demographic study, an evaluation of your niche market, developing that prototype or service that will be used as an example of what your product is going to look like. And we'll talk about both cost analysis and competitive pricing. And then at that point, if you're going to go to a co-manufacturer, we'll talk about some requirements of finding and using a manufacturer. And then finally at the end, taking the product to market. So this is just a little process map of what we're going to talk about. So you have the inception, the demographics, the niche market, and talking about the competition, how to develop a prototype, cost analysis, co-manufacturing, and then go to market. Okay. So really key that in the beginning, as you start to go through this, it's really key that you understand you may have a great product, but who is my customer? What specifics will my product satisfy? How will I communicate this product? So an excellent tool that I've used probably 50 times is called a SWOT. A SWOT is an evaluation of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's perfect for the ideation stage. It's simple but effective. Typically, and we'll go into some detail to explain this, but typically if you if you're just right at the startup point, and it's just you, then I would advise you to bring in a spouse. We know how spouses are very positively critical, and go through this process. It takes about an hour. You got to prepare a little bit beforehand, but it takes about an hour. And the key thing is we want to make sure that you are building the best version of your new concept, and it's different from your competitors. So you use your product SWOT to think out the strongest product concepts, and you'll see as we get into it how that will be brought out. So go ahead. This is an example of, I like to use this because it's a brewery. This is not any of my breweries, but I do have a couple breweries of how they put together their SWOT. So they're taking the strengths, which they had. They did have some stock. They felt like their marketing was good. They had a good management team, but their weaknesses were they were not tech savvy, which is really critical. They weren't able to expand very quickly, and don't have the reputation or the money of big breweries. So there are some weaknesses that stand out. On the other hand, from opportunity standpoint, they were proud of their packaging, was pretty unique. They were well aware of the craft beer niche, and there's some government programs, which there are, that will help with that type of brewery. The threats, though, and there's some big threats here. Vertical integration, they had a lot of competition. The price does tend to fluctuate, and it's a very tough, competitive market. So that they took an hour or two and went through and identified these, and then go to the next slide, Hannah. So you can see, I'm not going to go through all this, but basically what the SWOT analysis does for you, it identifies both the internal and external variances, and both the positive and the negative. So as you put together your SWOT and note the different aspects of and answering these questions, but these questions are pretty straightforward. You're going to see that you may have some great strengths, you may have some great opportunity. On the other hand, if you have a lot of weaknesses and a lot of threats, then this is the point where you need to double think: is this going to work? But it's a very methodical way of going through and evaluating. I always tell my clients, be brutally honest about how you appraise yourself using this tool, because it's going to make you or break you if you don't totally understand it.
John, one of the questions, oh, sorry, there was a little feedback there for a second. One of the questions we get a lot from clients around the SWOT analysis is, I have weaknesses and threats that I've identified. Should I just give up? I think sometimes the perception is if it's a good business idea, you won't have any of the weaknesses or threats. What would you say to a client that is worried about that?
Well, that's a good question, Hannah. So, and I've seen this in the past, having done 25 or 30 different SWOTs. What you have to do is you have to dig into your weaknesses and threats, evaluate them, and how do you overcome them? You may have a lot of strengths, may have a lot of opportunities, but you got to overcome your weaknesses and threats by changing the course and or taking positive action that will help balance that out. I don't want you to go in here and then just say, well, I'm going to give up on my dream. Don't do that, but it will identify those things you need to focus on beforehand in order to be a success.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's really helpful to have that realistic overview of where you're at and where you could be headed. But also good encouragement to not just give up, that there are ways that you can get past those weaknesses.
Right. Let me throw out just one other example of using the SWOT. I did have a client, actually I've worked with this client for a long time, but initially they were a manufacturer of high temperature furnaces. So they had a lot of engineers, they had 2 engineers, not a big company. But they had 2 engineers and they had expertise in the field. But we went through the SWOT, and what came out was that they were actually manufacturing very standard furnaces where there's a huge amount of competition. and the pricing was very difficult. But because they did have that expertise, we changed course and they started manufacturing custom furnaces, which there's a good market for. Pretty unique, but they were able to reach out to those companies that needed a custom furnace, and they turned things around. They weren't making any money at that point, but now they're very successful and very profitable. So that's kind of adds to your question, Hannah. That's the kind of things that you identify and react to.
Great, thanks, Jon.
Okay, so I think it's very important that the next step is you identify your demographics. It's called the target audience of the product or service, but it's the characteristics of people who will potentially buy your product or service. I'm not going to go through all this. There's a lot of information that can be pulled together. I'm going to tell you how to do it. So that information on demographics is really critical from a standpoint of knowing who to target. So a great tool that I've used and my clients have used is SurveyMonkey. So one more, I think, Hannah. SurveyMonkey has, it's amazing. I know you've probably heard of SurveyMonkey. Well, I'll send out a questionnaire or whatever. SurveyMonkey has just huge databases of customer information. They use artificial intelligence based on what your questions or what your survey requirements are going to be. And you can, it's very easy to manipulate. You can build and set up your own customized questionnaire that will go across the demographics of what's ideal for your product. So go ahead.
One more thing I just want to mention about demographic, another tool to do some demographic research that a lot of our clients have found to be helpful is the Biz Boost program through the Denver Public Library. You don't have to be a resident within Denver city limits. It's open to anyone in the state, and they offer free appointments with one of their business librarians who will help you kind of gather the type of data that you're looking for. If you're not yet in business, especially, is when it can be helpful if you don't really have a group of people to send a survey to and you're just in those initial phases. They can kind of help you get at some of this information and can also look at what your area, like your region that you're looking within. You can narrow it by area. So I'll put some links if that's something that you're interested in. You just, like I said, just have to be a resident of Colorado to take advantage of that as well. That's
a great point. I hadn't thought about that, but that's true. An example. Okay, so I had I've got a brewery, actually two breweries that I work with, but one of the breweries that I work with, they're very successful in the first location. They wanted to expand to a second location in the Denver area. And so they used SurveyMonkey. They pretty much knew what they were after as far as clientele, but they were trying to identify the best location that would meet that niche market of clientele, because they're all breweries are a little different. They had their specialty was very specific blends, and so they used SurveyMonkey, and I came up with what they thought is the ideal. A couple different locations in the Denver area, and they eventually opened up their second location. It's been very successful. So I know that this tool works. So there's a couple different templates you can use on SurveyMonkey. There's what's called the snapshot template. That's a very quick and easy template to use. And then there's a more advanced template, which goes into more detail from, like, for example, the geographic location, ethnicity, the business surrounding the area, personal income, etc. and there are many other demographic surveys. It's amazing how powerful this tool is from a standpoint of you just have to. Typically, SurveyMonkey will charge about $25 per survey, and but it's well worth it. You have to think about how you're going to define what your questions are, but because their databases are so huge, and they'll give you parameters of what specifically you're after. So I just think it's a wonderful tool, and it does create some very good focus on where your customers are and who they are.
It is a great tool. And there's a question kind of aside from the demo, once you have the demographic information kind of figured out, Marielle is wondering if you could give an example of how you would ask about a product in the survey. Like, how would you get at the interest of a product in the survey? Would you just say, are you interested in this product, and leave it at that? Would you drill deeper? What would you do for that?
I think that what you just said is probably accurate, although, define the product. You probably have a good idea what your demographics are going to be. So it has, you can dig deep if you want to on it, but and it'll define as you go exactly how deep you want to go. But it's really very simple to follow, and they do have good support from a standpoint. If you're not sure, then you can either chat with them or get them on the phone, and they will step you through it. It's pretty amazing. The fact that they've got so much data available, kind of to what you're saying, Hannah, is you need to be fairly specific about what you're after, because they can cover the world from that standpoint. And maybe your product is worldwide, but if you're specific to like a Denver location or a Colorado location, you need to notate that also.
Sure. Yes, that is really helpful to know. I think she's meaning like the criteria of interest. Like, how would you break down the different categories of what you're wanting to know about the product?
I think so you look at all the different things that it's like the 12-question template. So, for example, on my brewery, so we were after geographic location. We were after personal income, because that's kind of important. We were after marital status, and so I think we use those criteria to be able to pull up the geographic location. So again, you step through it. It's pretty easy to follow, and there is some creativity or intuitive things that you got to do, but again, they will help you through it without a doubt. So did that answer the question?
Yes, yeah, that's really helpful. And if there are more questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Yeah, I think that's one piece of it, is getting that demographic information for your target market. And then I think, like you're saying, Marielle, once you get into, are you interested in this product? Maybe some other questions would be, how would you use this product? Maybe even give them some multiple choice options to get at how they foresee themselves using it. So you can get a better understanding of how they'd be interacting with the product, I think is maybe the question that you're having. And that can take some time to think through as well. So if you'd be interested in scheduling a consulting appointment to kind of think through what that survey would look like, we can definitely set that up. But that was really helpful, John, for this demographic information. Thank you.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about, which is actually part of demographics, once the demographics have been identified, excuse me, then you need to focus in on really what your niche market is, and the demographics should help you get to that point. And the niche market is an opportunity to drill down and focus on that sector of people that most want to connect with you. So a couple of questions you're going to need to ask yourself as you try to work on that is, what specific problems do you solve? What pain points can you eliminate? Then what do you do better? What problems can you solve better than your competitors? And where do you excel? And again, if you go back to the SWOT analysis, you're gonna see that what your strengths are, and what your knowledge base is, or your product knowledge base is, and then who does your team, we'll assume you have a team, like to serve. And I guess you need to be hiring your team based on really the niche market that you're going after to some extent. So competition. This is really a key point. So you need to do what's called a competitive analysis, and this is an evaluation of your competition. And as you look at your target market, there may be opportunities within that target market that haven't been tapped. I'll give you an example. This is a silly example, but it's a good one. So there was a sporting good company that I work with that they were doing okay, but not doing great. So one of the target markets they went after for golf was lefties, because it's very difficult to find golf clubs that are for left-handed people. And they did a lot of marketing and advertising and bought in their left-hand products, which expanded into some other sporting goods. So they took off from a standpoint of they filled that vertical need that no one else was filling. So I mean, I'm sure with Amazon you can special order, but in most cases when you buy golf clubs, you want to test them. And so they got into that niche market and did very well. So a tool, interesting tool that you can use, it's called Alexa Audience Overlap Tool. Basically what this tool does, it will compare your website to competition. And it's really, I've gone through it a couple times. It's really very easy to use. And what you're trying to do is see what the competition is offering from a standpoint of their websites. It also brings up an interesting part of it. It brings up keywords that are kind of across the board, but attractive from a standpoint of your website and Google, because Google will, from a standpoint of your what's called search engine optimization, or your placement on Google, will be based on keywords. So you get to know what, using this tool, and it's very easy to use. You go in and just Google Audience Overlap Tool, and it'll come right up. 3 or 4 or 5 different steps. You're gonna see some very similar websites and some very similar companies that you're gonna compete with. So I just think it's a great tool to follow. Okay. So as we get to, I think it was an interesting part just because I'm a manufacturing guy, but if in fact you're at the point where you're comfortable with how far you've come, then you need to work on a prototype. And basically there are a number of really good 3D prototype companies in the Denver area, and they'll not only just build you a 3D prototype based on your drawing or schematic, or sometimes they will even help you put together the drawing or schematic, and then they'll build the 3D model which you can use from a standpoint of what your product's going to look like. But this gets a little tricky, but I think it's important. So the key to fluid prototyping is to minimize the complexity of your product. So that's called MVP, and so you want your product to have the features that are necessary to go to launch, but not anything that goes beyond that because of costs related and because of complexity. You need to make sure that prototype has functionality, durability, customer appeal, and value. And then you can, once you have that prototype built, and again, these companies will help you with all those details for a price, obviously, but if you're going to go to a manufacturer, or you need to make sure you got a good prototype put together. Now, one thing that on the next step that I think is important is you need to, once you have that prototype built, you need to validate it with a survey group or a test market. And this group doesn't have anything complex, but it needs to be participants that you feel, based on all your research so far, fill the demographics of what would be attractive as far as that product goes. And so we'll go into a couple of questions here on the next slide of once you got your prototype, questions you would ask.
Sure. Quick question, John, about developing the prototype. Kimberly has a great question, wondering if it's common to use 3D printing for prototype development.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I've had probably 20 different clients that have used 3D modeling, and it's amazing. It really is amazing how, once you have a drawing or a schematic or even an idea that you can describe, it's amazing the detail that the 3D printing will provide. I mean, it's going to be a real functional product that you can use to demonstrate either from a standpoint of either financing or like I say, the survey group to test your market.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so if I was to do a survey group, these are the questions I would ask. How often you use our product? What features are most valuable to you? How would you compare our products to our competitors? What features are missing? Now, what are you trying to solve by using our product? That is really, really key, because your product needs to relieve a pain point and or fill a need for your customer. And then what other types of people could you find product useful? How easy it is to use? How would you rate the value for the money? Which that's kind of ahead of the game here, because we will come up with the costing here in a second. How likely are you recommend this product to others? And last, how could we improve this product? So you're getting a good, hopefully you're getting a good cross demographic group, but specific to your niche market, that will answer these questions. And you can do it in like a 1-hour session, just pulling them together. And if you have them at the house or have them someplace else, that's fantastic. But they're going to give you, hopefully they'll give you some really good input, which again is a very important step. Okay, so as we get into the manufacturing piece, there are some specific requirements that you need to keep in mind as you seek out a manufacturer, and we'll talk about how to find a manufacturer here in a second. So one of the most key things is as you do, again, we'll show you how to research different companies, but do they in fact have any type of quality management system in place to ensure consistency of quality and service? Most manufacturers that have a good reputation do have what we call a QMS, quality management system, in place. A lot of them are ISO certified. Also, ISO certification is the international standard of operating. And if you see that when you're researching your manufacturers, that's really key. Then some other questions are, what are your payment terms? Are they negotiable based on? So typically, payment terms are, okay, so I want you to manufacture 100 widgets, and they're going to say, okay, here's the price for that. Okay, what if I have 500? What if I have 1,000? The rate that they're going to charge will go down as the number of widgets go up, because from a manufacturing standpoint, the more they produce on one run, the more efficient it is for them. So the other question I would ask, can you provide references of current customers? And if they can't, you don't want to be talking to them. In most cases, they will. Then you need to determine, again, part of your costing. What are the total costs, including delivery, fees, tax, tariff? If you go international, you're going to be facing some serious tariff charges that have escalated in the last year, which is pretty amazing. So, and then kind of like the prototype, once you develop the prototype, do you have trial runs of product for the review? You want to be able to put your hands around how well they duplicate your prototype. And then the last point is, are your operators that work in manufacturing, are they certified with formal training? All those are key questions, and I've used this questionnaire numerous times for my clients that are seeking out a manufacturer. In most cases, if they don't answer the questions or you're not happy with them, then you need to move on to somebody else. And I've seen that happen many times. So, okay. So where do I go to find a manufacturer? That's a very common question, but there are, other than talking to Jon Jaggers, there are many directories out there that they have very specifically hundreds of thousands of manufacturers. I had some of those most popular ones that I just put down domestic because of the complexity of international. So the most popular ones are Thomas Net, Makers Row, MFG, Compass, National Association of Manufacturers member list. And you can actually drill down on these websites, on these directories, specific. They will, first of all, they'll do a general description of what they manufacture. So you take a look at that, see if it fits within your product. And then once you've established that, you can drill down even further and get more detail about a specific company that you picked off these directories. And it'll give you all the information you need from a contact standpoint. And most of them that are on this list, I found, are very open to discussing all the different things we talked about as far as terms and capabilities. They wouldn't be on these lists if they weren't very reputable. Okay. So cost analysis is extremely important. Once you decide on your product and your target market, then it's really important that you identify your costs. So some real simple terms here. Cost of goods, it needs to be identified, which is basically your labor and your materials if you're building the product yourself, and or the manufacturer's cost of goods. And then what is going to be your overhead, because you will have some overhead involved. So you need to identify both those. I would recommend, highly recommend, that you consult with a industry professional such as myself or an engineer to get a better estimate of the manufacturing costs. It's these folks are the type of people that deal with this all the time and know how to pinpoint the cost. So then the other thing is, you need to take a look at, okay, once you've established the cost, how does that compare to similar products that are selling in the market? And how much will the average consumer be willing to spend based on that product? And this may be a stopping point if in fact you feel like that you cannot either manufacture yourself or manufacture outsource manufacturing to be competitive. That point probably could have been and should have been brought out a little bit back in the SWOT from a standpoint of understanding your competition. Okay. So now we're going to market. There's other aspects and strategies you need to consider, which include the overall pricing we talked about, how you're going to distribute your product, and sometimes your manufacturer will do the distribution, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes you'll, if you make the product yourself, you may have to identify what's called a co-packer. Co-packers will take your product, they will package it, they will send it out, they will set up the billing, and so they're going to cover all aspects of it. Initially, my recommendation is do all that yourself. If you got a good website and if you use Shopify, you're going to be able to easily excuse me, go through the selling proposition. So the point here is 1 in 4 businesses are selling more products online. This is a 2021 Fortune survey. But going through the pandemic, some things that came out because of having to operate e-commerce, many of them have developed new products and services to fit that e-commerce space, which I think is important. As you well know, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with purchasing everything online rather than going to the brick and mortar location. And so I think that that's an important point to consider when you decide how you're going to go to market. The other thing is you can also partner with. There are many different companies that look for partners from a standpoint of your product, and actually your manufacturer probably once you identified a manufacturer, if you find one that is producing similar products but not competitive product, then they give you the advantage and the influence of already going after your target market and to help you to market that product successfully. So overall, when you estimate your cost, your final retail price, it's really key from a standpoint that you do put together a budget and a timeline, but you got to be brutally honest with yourself, but yet at the same time reasonable and realistic as possible. So, wow.
Jon, quick question on that, mentioning a timeline, and I'm sure it's different depending on the business, but is there an average timeline of how long this process would take a business? My experience has been, if you're doing this full time, which a lot of clients are not, if you do it full time, then I think you can accomplish all these things within 3 to 6 months. If you're doing it part time, it may take up to a year in reality, because I know you don't want to wait that long, but that's realistic. If you in fact
go through this process and go through all the different steps and make sure that you are comfortable that it's going to take some time. So.
Great.
Okay, there was another question there that popped up. Did you get that, Hannah?
Yeah, it looks like maybe someone interested in a consultation. She mentions that they have their cost calculation for their product, but there's a lot of confusion about prices going up, which I'm sure is an issue for most of our businesses right now with the inflation rates. Yes, you ask about signing up for a consultation with Jon. Absolutely. I will put a link for his calendar in the chat here, and we'll also put that in the follow-up email. You can look at what all is involved with that in a consultation.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Hannah, that's a very good point, because the 40 clients that I have today, probably 39 of them have had to deal with escalating material and labor costs. And so, when you put together your estimates, you better be darn sure that you do a lot of research to figure out what those costs are going to be, because the days of $15 employees are long gone, and the cost of product materials have changed considerably. So I think it's also when you go through those costs, you'd be really, again, be honest about, do I really want to jump into this if in fact those costs are so prohibitive that it's not going to be worth your time. I'm not discouraging, don't get me wrong, but you need to be realistic. So thank you for your time and attention. Keep in mind that this webinar was an overview. In the 50 minutes that I took of me going through it, it's strictly an overview. And so I've got 8 years of experience with this process. I know that it does work. I've seen it work many, many times. And as Hannah mentioned, my consulting services and the services of all our great consultants at North Metro SBDC. What's the best route, Hannah, for someone to get some one-on-one consulting?
Yeah, directly through our website. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can get some links now to put here in the chat. But yeah, directly through our website, you can see the list of all of our consultants and can schedule directly online that way. If you need help with any of that, you can always reach out to us through our email, which is northmetro.sbdc@frontrange.edu. And we also have a live chat on our website, as well as a hotline number to call into. So lots of ways to get in touch with us. And I will put some of that here in the chat. And while I do that, there was a question, Jon, about, you talk about the demographic data. What's the best way to analyze all of that data that you get? I think for clients, a lot of times it can feel overwhelming to get all this information, and then taking that next step of knowing how to use that data can be kind of tricky. What would you recommend? Okay,
so interesting enough question. SurveyMonkey does have a site, which I think you're gonna send out, and it's called the market research site. So it's basically going to take your data and provide some further detail to it. I've used it a couple of times, and it's amazing. Again, because their databases are so huge and their artificial intelligence is so good, they're going to say, okay, here's where you're at. Here's your summary to what your questions are. That works really well. You do have that site, right?
Yep, that'll be coming in the follow-up email.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. We have a couple minutes, so I always like to get a little feedback. So Kimberly, you're the only one who is brave enough to put your image on there. So I'm gonna, and you're right next to me. You're right over here. So what do you think? I know I covered a lot of information and I wish it was more time, but what did you glean out of it?
Excellent. This is probably the 1 hour session I was looking for the prototype that I did hire to be 3D printed. We did an initial cost analysis. We followed a lot of the proof of concept ideas that you had listed, but I see now I can do some serious refinement with that. And now I have a plan forward to how to find a manufacturer. So very useful. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, I'm going to jump around here and you can answer if you want to, but you don't have to. Tiffany Garcia. I can't see you, but I know you're there. You might be muted. I think you are muted. What were your thoughts on the webinar? You got to unmute yourself, though. I guess Tiffany's not. I guess she's not talking. So, all right. Well, anybody else that wants to jump in, feel free. Don't be bashful. Hannah, we either have a very satisfied audience or they don't want to talk. So,
I recommend other people take advantage of this opportunity to ask Jon some questions, because I spent so much time on my product and did find in my limited survey that there was definitely need for it. And then I got stumped with the manufacturing. The 3D printer had originally said they were going to help set me up with a manufacturer, and that didn't pan out. So then it just went by the wayside, and a year later, here I am. So it seems to be a much easier nut to crack than I realized. So I encourage everybody to take advantage while you have Jon on the phone or the chat.
Or feel free to contact me through, oh, there you go. Olga.
Hi, Jon. So I was also curious if you are also a consultant for state SBDC located in Boulder. So I went through their tech accelerator, and if I would meet you like year and a half ago, that would be even way more beneficial for me when we applied for SBIR grant. So I think if you can be their consultant as well, or if, because it's still SBDC, right, all around the Colorado. So if you can spread this information to that people, that will be helpful for others who apply for SBDC. And SBDC is a perfect, SBIR, I mean, is a perfect place to apply to proof of concept for free, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Hannah, if you can answer that, because you're more into grants and loans.
Yes, yeah, there is a lot of great overlap there, Olga. Like you're saying, a lot of this would be helpful to those for that program, for people who are applying to those grants. So through the SBDC network, since like you mentioned, we are a statewide network, we can do some transfers with, even though you've been involved with the Boulder SBDC for the SBIR program. If you were wanting to meet with Jon, we could just do a transfer for that to happen, since we do have each center kind of has some specialties. And I don't know that Boulder has a manufacturing specialist on their team right now. So we'd be happy to connect you with Jon or anyone else who's in that sort of situation, and vice versa. They have some specialties in like with their tech source program and some of the technology programs that they have going on, that we refer clients to them in that way. So yeah, we really encourage you to make use of the entire statewide network, because each office has a little bit of a different specialty in their background.
And to add to that, Olga, I do service Boulder, and I'm very aware of the SBR program, although Boulder has some SBR specialists that can really be more assistance than I will. But from a manufacturing standpoint, I cover Boulder, Larimer, Grand Junction, across the state, because there are not that many manufacturing consultants in the state, which is kind of surprising, but it gives me an advantage to cover the whole state. So it's pretty good.
So it's mean, Hannah, it's still okay to sign up for me because I'm located in Evergreen and I've been dealing with Aurora SBDC and Boulder SBDC. And is it still okay to sign up through North Metro SBDC for the consultation? Or should
Yes.
I-
Yeah, when it's kind of like a specialist, like we mentioned, manufacturing is more of a specialty niche. What we would just do is a guest permit for Jon. So even though the North Metro isn't your home SBDC necessarily, we can still make that happen. So feel free to schedule that appointment, and yeah, that you won't have any troubles there.
Yeah, it seems like Evergreen does not belong to anybody, to any SBDC around. So I've been reaching out to all different, and everybody said, no, Evergreen is not our area. Okay.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, some of those smaller communities, I think it gets kind of tricky. I'll have to check which region it technically falls within. I would think maybe Denver, but I'd have to look at a map. But anyways, we want to help you get the resources that you need no matter where you are. So we'll definitely help you get connected.
Thank you. I very appreciate it.
Yeah,
All
of
right,
course.
thanks, Logan.
Yeah, great questions. And I know we're coming up on our hour here. So we really appreciate you all joining us today for this content. Like I mentioned, I will be sending out a follow-up email with the slides, the recording, and some extra links for resources. And Jon, is there anything else you wanted to share while we have everyone today?
Yeah, just one last point, and I know I've made this a couple of times. You need to make sure that you do all your best use of all the tools that I've laid out. And again, I am more than willing to help you work through them. But if you do take the time, the effort, your chances of success are going to be escalated considerably. So.
Fantastic. Thank you for that encouragement, Jon. And thank you so much for all of the great content today. We really appreciate you preparing all of this and presenting it. And like I said, thank you all for joining, and we hope you have a great afternoon and hope that you'll join us for our next one.